Ghost now has merch. Find shirts, mugs, and more with the Ghost logo for sale at our merch store. There's free shipping and 10% off now with the coupon NEWMERCH10. Did we say there's free shipping? Check out all the goods at calaroga.com, that's CALOROGA.com, or just look for the link in the show notes. Thanks for supporting the show, we really appreciate it.
Content warning. The following story contains descriptions of violence, blood, and disturbing horror elements. Please use listener discretion.
Calaroga Shark Media. Hi and welcome to Ghost. This episode is titled Brood 19.
To the residents of the sleepy rural town of Chitterley Hollow, the arrival of the Brood 19 cicadas in the sweltering summer of 2024 was far more than just a noisy inconvenience. It was an omen of unspeakable dread, a harbinger of malignant forces stirring from their subterranean lairs to sow fresh seeds of terror in the earthly realms. For as the first nymphal casings split apart and their ruby-eyed winged horrors took to the skies in deafening innumerable droves, so too did darker presences begin bleeding forth from the loamy rifts and fissures beneath the township's sun-cured fields and groves. Portentous, ectoplasmic miasmas that flickered in and out of peripheral sight, leaving after-images of desiccated mandibles and flitting gossamer wings etched across waking human vision. It started slowly at first, just a handful of the town's most sensitive children and elderly residents claiming to have felt the icy breath of unseeable specters trailing across their skin during the eerie, trance-like lulls that sometimes fell between the cicadas' deafening round-the-clock humming. But soon, even the most stoically level-headed townsfolk found themselves flinching at subtle movements in their peripheral glare, unsure if the writhing shapes slithering past were simply dust motes, or something far more disturbing given animate impulse. Strangest of all were the whisperings that seemed to ride in on the cicadas' ceaseless, oscillating vibrations. Maddening supplications and unutterable urgencies distilled into throbbing, subaudible frequencies just beyond the range of wakeful mortal perception. Yet to the most psychically attuned Chitterley Hollow residents, these sibilant, buzzing tones conveyed cryptic imperative snippets hinting at blasphemous primordial rites, long predating the agricultural pioneers who first carved out their collective homestead from the virgin forestscapes. It was old Myrna Westbrook, the eccentric widow and reputed hedge mystic who first provided the awful context behind the encroaching cicada haunting. One mid-June afternoon, as the shrill, insectile humming reverberated through every rafter and cranny of Chitterley Hollow's clabbered farmhouses and steepled community church, Myrna strode from her decrepit, weed-choked hovel in a trance of malign inspiration. Her white caftan robes billowed around her like soul-stained wings as she stalked across the baking asphalt, and her wild bluegrass mane writhed as if exposed to high-voltage alternating currents of unholy sentience. "They want 17 years of reverence returned to them," she announced in a dead monotone, her lidless eyes boring into the heart of each passer-by she confronted along the byway. "The Goldenrod Kingdom seeks recompense for our sins against their sovereignty. Our shrinings guttered, our rituals defiled, our rites sundered and ground beneath shovel and plough." Absalom Garber, the town's Lutheran minister, happened to be out performing visitations on Main Street that afternoon. Despite his typical affable nature, the sight of Myrna's slitted eyes and droning tones of preternatural conviction triggered a reflexive recoil, as if her very proximity was somehow spiritually corrosive and soiled. "Peace be with you, Myrna," he soothed, instinctively clasping his rosary beads in a protective clutch. The plump, bespectacled matron only shuddered at his platitudes, seeming to retreat further inward in the grip of her ineffable possession trance. No tidings can mollify what comes next. Shepherd of hollow hymns and rote benedictions, her rasping vox intoned as she glided away down the street, seemingly weightless. 100 septennial turnings your flocks have scuffed and ground the scions of the brood into their fallow loams. Now their husks arise to recapture what oversights of husbandry so arrogantly stole. Feeding upon the seeds of avarice, you thoughtless late-born scattered upon the sanctified groves in hopes of denying their rightful heritage. As Myrna apparated around a corner, leaving a trail of disturbed gravel and pollen in her phantasmal wake, Absalom was left clutching his starched collar in a cold, incredulous sweat. Surely the addled crone was merely spouting one of her typical cryptic doomsayings, fueled by the tinctures and folk nostrums she was rumoured to imbibe in her eccentric, squalid solitude. But over the next few nights, Absalom's repose was haunted by sinister half-dreams of maddening subterranean pulsations and fluttering winged shapes bleeding forth from cyst fissures in the town's fertile ochre soils. Images of Chitterley Hollow's steepled skyline being overrun by formations of some unguessable alien purpose, 1,000 billion gleaming wings drifting on etheric zephyrs, raining down like sparkling rasped scythes of purifying retribution. And beneath it all, the incessant, percussive thrumming of the cicadas, a hypnotic, metronomic pulse that bored through his very marrow like an infinite swarm drill, delving ever deeper towards the unspeakable Stygian seed at the world's vasculitic root. Over the subsequent weeks, Absalom's unsettling visions soon proved to be something far more grounded and visceral than mere tormented reverie. Around town, the first whispers began circulating of townspeople awakening in their beds to find amorphous heaps of desiccated chitinous shells scattered across their downy comforters, shimmering with trace membranes of some unknown secreted resin. Tufts of cottony spoor trailed up the bedposts and window frames, as if the brooding manifestations required to seed these blasphemous growths could not be fully contained within any one airtight sanctity. Yet the situation grew exponentially more horrific when the first victims began emerging from their haunted homes in ritualized, trance-like fugues, with empty shells trailing from where their orifices now blossomed in grotesque, calcifying blastulae. No matter how loved ones tried to intervene, the glazed eyes and stilled expressions of the possessed seemed to broadcast a simple, primordial message. We have already been reclaimed by the brood, and our transgressions upon this land are being rendered unto due recompense. It was a week after the initial possessions first reared their arboreal cicada-birthed terrors, when Absalom was awakened in the parsonage's humid master bedroom by a sudden, rambunctious stirring from his wife Elizabeth's side of the canopied bed. At first convinced she was merely suffering a troubled sleep seizure, he rolled over in mild annoyance, intending to gently jostle the woman back into repose. What he saw instead nearly caused his heart to seize with shock and revulsion. There, stirring amidst the tangled lawn of her flaxen hair, was a veritable thatch of desiccated insect carapaces, thousands upon thousands of distended hollow shells and fibrous rotten wings, all seeming to cyclically sough and recoil in her sun-drenched tresses, like the ocean's tides driven by the pull of some arcane lunar appetite. As Absalom watched in abject, slack-jawed awe, further waves and pulses of the effluvia began emerging directly from Elizabeth's slack, slightly parted lips every few moments, like a dense, musky fog bank blown forth by the exhalations of some titanic, subterranean bellows. For several minutes more, the preacher's wife continued venting the roiling, gelatinous cicada spore with every outrushing breath, the ever-accumulating drift of charnel residue cascading over her chin and breasts in a fetid, gently frothing tide. But just when it seemed her entire upper body was in danger of being consumed and assimilated by the noisome exuviae, she abruptly ceased her rhythmic spawning and convulsed upright on the sheets. There was a horrific, muffled crunching that sent Absalom bolting from the bed to switch on the bedroom's sconces, only to be greeted with the sight of Elizabeth's face, now partially obscured by a hardening amber-coloured veneer, through which thousands of translucent pupae squirmed and gestated. Where her eyes, mouth and nostrils had been, only vaguely discernible whorls and sutures remained in the gnarled, calcified mask rapidly encasing her head in its suffocating balm growth. Absalom screamed in sheer, world-sundering horror as the aberrant crustacean completed its rapid, merciless mineralization, leaving only a mute, flailing torso thrashing beneath a head now entirely reborn as a chitinous, silkworm opalescent cyst. Already, its ridged fissures were pulsing with the first few legionary precursor waves of erupting nymphs, each one slashing free of its pupal shroud in a miniature spasm of hemorrhaged tissues and fluids. Then, as if responding to some silent, overmined synaptic command, the newly hatched broodlings swiveled in eerie, coordinated unison to confront the cowering minister beside the bed. Several slashed towards Absalom in a wickedly synchronized volley. Their opalescent wings loud and hungry. No, ravenous as they descended upon the mortal's exposed flesh like the countless wings of some great pestilential seraph finally rousing from its tomb slumber. Today, all that remains to greet passers-by through Chitterley Hollow stands as mute testaments to the township's hushed, darkly spoken trauma. The occasional pile of ossified insectile castings found gathering dust in a shadowed corner or leaking from the seams of an abandoned domicile. And in the evenings, a still pregnant quiet has replaced that once familiar sonorous hum that rippled through the verdant grasses and sundown orchards. For whether the brood fulfilled their vengeful zeal for unconditional reverence before retreating back beyond tangible human perception remains a question none dare explore too deeply. Some obscure primeval dread runs too profoundly for such prying interrogation, instinctually warning that to seek certain unvarnished truths is to surrender one's last semblances of hearth, solace, and identity to a preternatural desolation waiting just beneath the world's mossy, rain-soaked loam.
Ghost is a Calaroga Shark media production, written and hosted by Alexander Ian McIntyre, produced by Mark Francis, executive producers Mark Francis and John McDermott. Portions of this podcast may have been created with the assistance of AI.
This show, along with hundreds of others from Calaroga Shark Media, is available commercial-free on any player, hassle-free. Just look for the link in the episode or show notes.
Calaroga Shark Media.